the body. Are all bodies mine, or are no bodies mine? When I am identifying myself with a body which I call mine, all other bodies become alien to me as objects. The two together, my body and all the other bodies comprising the world. But when what I call my body is seen as my object, distinct and separate from me, naturally I have no other option left except to extend the same perspective to the whole world and group my body also along with the world of objects. Then all bodies become mine, or no body is mine at all. In either case, I stand as the real background of the whole world. The body is the cell in which both the sage and the ignorant man seem to sleep. The one feels free and the other bound. As in a cell in his own lockup, an inspector of police may rest content and be refreshed, so also in this cage of body, one who is in charge of it may live refreshed, at one with that which is contentment itself. Is there consciousness in dead matter? The question is absurd. Dead matter or body does not exist in its own right, but exists only as the objects of the perceiver. It is the perceiver who lights up the object with his consciousness. In other words, his consciousness appears limited in the form of the body, or the body is his consciousness itself, but consciousness cannot be divided, so it is the whole consciousness itself. Therefore, the question is absurd on the face of it. When you know any object, you stand as consciousness, and the object also cannot help appearing as consciousness, since consciousness cannot perceive anything but consciousness. Or in other words, when you rise to the level of consciousness to examine the object, it is also transformed into consciousness, and its objectivity disappears. So objects cannot exist as such when you stand as consciousness. While everything shines by the light of consciousness, consciousness does not require any other light because it is self-luminous. But at a lower level, it can be said that bodies abide in mind and mind in consciousness. Nothing can limit consciousness. A beginner in the spiritual path can, as a preliminary course, conceive that consciousness is in him first. But when he becomes centered in consciousness, the inside and outside vanish, so far as he is concerned, and he is lifted up into pure consciousness. It is in me that thoughts arise, and in thoughts that bodies arise. So compared to the I principle consciousness, The gross world is evidently very, very small and can never exist as such along with the I. It is wrong to say that the world exists in thoughts or that thoughts exist in the I, because gross forms as such vanish when thoughts appear, and thoughts become consciousness when they touch it. Nothing is inert, but all is consciousness appearing as limited. And even that apparent limitation is consciousness itself. Thus, reality is seen existing here and now, in you, in and beyond all states. Reality only appears as if it is tagged on to something else, like body, senses, or mind. Eliminate that tagged on part, and you remain as yourself, the real center. But when you try to eliminate the apparently unreal parts from consciousness, you find that each of them is mysteriously transformed into consciousness itself, leaving nothing to be eliminated. This method takes you directly to the natural state. Bondage and liberation. Bondage is identification with the body, senses, and mind. Liberation is the giving up of that identification by visualizing what you are. But what is bondage and liberation actually? When personality comes into the impersonal, it is bondage. When personality merges in the impersonal, it is liberation. But when it is established, so far as you are concerned, that there can be nothing other than the impersonal, it is immaterial whether you stand as the personal or as the impersonal. Can you speak on slavery versus freedom? The ordinary man is a slave to the body, senses, and mind. This slavery is dissolved only in the alchemy of your love for the Guru, for freedom. Freedom is the surrender of slavery at the feet of the Guru, the Absolute. Usually it is slavery or bondage that craves for freedom, but often it is found unwilling to shake off bondage itself when freedom comes. Incessant thought of bondage is not the way to transcend it. So turn your attention to real freedom, the Absolute, and bondage dies. What is the test of being free versus being bound? If, when you think of consciousness, the I thought comes in spontaneously, and vice versa, then you are free. And if, when you think of the body, the I thought comes in spontaneously, and vice versa, then you are bound. But what binds me? The world of forms is never the cause of bondage. It is the world of names alone that binds you. A perception left to itself dies out naturally. But if you give a name to it, the perception becomes an idea. And then it becomes capable of being remembered. And only then does it begin to bind you. But what is the real truth about bondage? It is not objects, but only your own thoughts and feelings that appear to bind you. But thoughts and feelings can never bind you unless the ego is present to claim them as its own. At the moment when thoughts and feelings occur, the ego is not present. The ego comes only after thoughts and feelings have disappeared. Then the ego alone is present, and no thoughts or feelings. So therefore, thoughts and feelings and the ego can never exist simultaneously. And so you transcend bondage. And hence there never has been any bondage at any time. How is it said that the cause of both bondage and liberation is the mind? As it says in the Upanishad, it is just mind that is the cause of bondage and of liberation also in our human lives. In bondage, mind is tied to objects, but in freedom, in liberation, mind recalls that it is truly objectless. You see, the mind has two kinds of activities. One, being extroverted, perceives objects, and the other, being introverted, and perceives the real self, Atma. When the mind is introverted, it comes into touch with the absolute self and becomes surcharged with the aroma of Atma. In that state, whatever comes out of that apparent mind will be perfect in all its aspects. It comes spontaneously and without a stop. There is no apparent gap to claim any right over any of those statements. Every word or sentence written or spoken by a sage is of this nature, each being a mantra in itself. It helps to bring you nearer the truth. The rest is for you to experience. What about the myth of bondage and liberation? I know myself, I know I am. This is the only fact that does not want a proof. Everything has to be reduced to knowledge before I can know it or absorb it into me as knowledge. Because I am knowledge itself, therefore I can know nothing other than myself. Bondage comes in when I do not know myself, and this position is absurd. Therefore there is no bondage and no liberation either. Knowing this, be free and be at peace. So what is it that seems to really bind me? It is not the outside that binds you, but it is something inside. It is only your ignorance of what you are. and your identification with the wrong thing. That is, identification with body, senses, and mind that really binds you. Listen, the inspector of police and the thief may be sleeping or resting in similar and adjacent cells in the police lockup. The inspector does not feel bound, but the thief does. Thus, the liberated, though in apparent bondage, is free beyond doubt. Diversity is bondage, and non-duality is liberation. When you yourself stand as the many, you cannot help seeing many outside. But when you stand as the only one, you can never see the many. The many in you are the body, senses, and mind. So stand as the one subject in yourself. And the world will also stand reduced to the one reality. And this is liberation. Here is a short way to look at liberation. You see, the course of liberation, or the solution of the world, consists of only 3 simple steps. You have a malady, which is the wrong identification with body, senses, and mind, and by which man appears to be bound and becomes miserable. And then you have a remedy. Separation. The body, senses, and mind are shown to be distinct and separate from the real self, which stands as the perpetual knower or witness. And thirdly, there is the recovery, the correct identification. Standing as that witness, you stand identified with being, and the witness disappears. Then the witness ceases and stands as the ultimate reality, absolute pure consciousness. Sense objects tie you down to the world, but when you come into contact with the sage, you get tied down to the ultimate. You can be relieved from the former bondage, no doubt, but there is no escape from the latter. Books. Ancient Indian works of merit, particular spiritual ones, were all of undisclosed authorship. For example, many of the Upanishads. The habit of advertising the authorship in order to enhance the sale of the book is a degenerate modern tendency of the inflated ego. What books on philosophy shall we read? Books will not help you much to understand the truth. Sometimes they may even do you much harm. Suppose you read the Bhagavad Gita, which is recognized as one of the basic tripod of Hindu scriptures. Your only help is the existing commentaries. You do not know whether a particular commentator was a man who had realized the truth or not. If he had not, he will misguide you. You can read only your own sense in a book, be it the original or a commentary. A sage alone can show you the truth, but after understanding the truth from the sage, You may read only the few books he suggests to keep you in the groove he has chalked out. After some time, when you are established in the truth yourself, you may read any book, good or bad. Every book has some nuggets of truth in it. You will yourself be able to pick these out and throw away the dross. If nothing in the book attracts you, accept it for its existence value, and thus find it an expression of the ultimate. What is the difference between listening to the words of the sage and reading the sage's writings? When you read the works of a sage, you read your own sense into his words. You try to illumine the writings of the sage with the distorting light of your puny intellect, and you fail miserably. But on listening to the sage, because the sage himself gives the full blaze of his light of pure consciousness to the talk, his words are understood by you in the correct manner, in spite of all your resistance. But how far can the book of a sage help a spiritual aspirant? There is as much difference between a sage and his book as between yourself and your image in a mirror. The image is devoid of the life principle of consciousness, which is the very substance of the original. The image is a reflection of the exterior alone and has no interior. So in a similar way, the book or language can convey only the mere exterior of truth. But truth has no distinctions such as exterior and interior. Therefore, nobody can get at the essence of truth through books or through language alone. A book as such is dead and inert, and cannot answer a new question arising from the one dealt with in the book. Whenever you read a book, you read something of your own sense in it. But this, however, you cannot do when you read the books of the Guru. Language is limited, but the Guru is unlimited. If anybody considers the Guru to be limited by a particular body or mind, he is wrong, and that conception is not the real Guru. But if body and mind cease to have their character as such, they are also the Guru. Why can't one obtain truth from the books of a sage? This can be answered in many ways. First, who asks the question? Of course, the ego mind. The mind can understand only in terms of the mind. The truth transcends the mind, and so cannot be understood in terms of the mind. You read books and understand them only at the mental level. Therefore, truth cannot be understood from books. A second way of seeing this is truth cannot be understood from anything other than truth, because everything other than truth is untruth. Thus, a book as such is also an untruth, and anything understood from it by the mind is also untruth. And a third way to see it, the question itself is the product of ignorance. The question presupposes that truth can be obtained from somewhere else as an object of the mind. But the fact about truth is that it is the self. You are always that, and the question of obtaining it is wrong and does not legitimately arise. It is the activities of the body, senses, and mind that obstruct your visualizing the truth as your real nature. Then you might ask, how does the Guru help you? Truth being your real nature, it has not to be obtained from elsewhere, but the obstacles on the path have to be removed. And then the truth, being self-luminous, shines in its own glory. This is actually what the Guru does. If a child asks where its body is, no book can teach it where it is. The nurse has only to remove the child's clothes, and nothing else has to be done to show the child its own body. Similarly, the Guru creates the conditions wherein your real nature of truth shines in all its glory, and the mind with all its questions disappears forever.